Thanks for tuning in to another podcast. And joining me today is Phil Micans, who has qualifications from the US and the UK as a master's degree and a bachelor's degree in food and vitamin technology, pharmacy, and biochemistry. He's been actively involved in the anti-aging medicine scene since the late 1980s and has contributed to numerous books, magazine, radio, and TV shows on various subjects connected to healthy aging. He is the editor-in-chief of Aging Matters magazine, the assistant editor to the Lifespan Medicine Journal, and director to the British Longevity Society. He also advises the Stromboli Conference on Cancer and Aging and the London Anti-Aging Conference. In 1991, he was a co-founder of the IAS Group, International Anti-Aging Systems, an organization dedicated to the dissemination of preventative and regenerative medicine information and the supply of hard-to-obtain health products. Phil, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Lawrence. A pleasure to be here. And I hope we can give a few interesting stories or whatever we want to talk about today, because we're totally open, aren't we? No script here whatsoever.
No filter. Yeah, we got no filter. You can say whatever you want, Phil. So thanks for joining me. Such an illustrious guest with such amazing qualifications in, and a lifetime spent in the health industry, I guess, and decades of research on your behalf. And I know that you kind of focus specifically on anti-aging as one of the main areas of your research and stuff you do with IAS. Tell us a little bit about how you got into it, Phil, and why you chose to take this path.
Well, I guess, thank you for that. I'll do my best. I guess it started for me when I was a teenager, sort of 15, 16, 17, that kind of age. And I thought that I was aging faster than my friends of the same age, and I sort of never had a good hairline, always carried a bit too much weight, and it started to play on me a little bit. I thought, I didn't have an unhealthy lifestyle, no worse than any other teenager, but I thought to myself, what is it? And I suppose that seed was implanted in my mind. What is aging? Why do we age? And then as I got older and I got into my 20s, there was some demand. My family ran a health food shop, vitamin store kind of operation. And so there was some demand, as it were, for me to go off in that direction. But they wanted somebody that would learn more about pharmacy and medicines, because we're talking now in the early 80s. And in America, where, of course, most of these trends tend to start, there was the beginning of the life extension or longevity medicine movement. And there were various people, perhaps the most famous two from that time period would have been Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw, who wrote a book called Life Extensions and sold over 1 million copies, which surprised everybody. Basically, what can we do to slow down our aging, arrest our aging, aspects of aging, not perhaps globally. And so it spun from there. And of course, over time, we did this, we did that, we got into this, we got into that. My very first big meeting, as it were, was in 1995 when I flew to Las Vegas, of course, to go to what's known as the A4M. That's the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And in those days, a few hundred people would turn up. I wouldn't say it was in its infancy, but it was certainly fledgling at that time. And today, if you went along to the A4M, which takes place every December, there'd be several thousand health professionals there. So it's really gained some momentum. I mean, in the early days when we said to people, I'm into anti-aging, they laughed, but like all new ideas, eventually they stop laughing and start taking you seriously. You can call it what you like. Some people don't like that term. Some people do like that term. I mean, if you go back to the late, great Linus Pauling, who was a double Nobel laureate, and he was the great vitamin C man, he termed a phrase which was called orthomolecular, which really just means natural to and in the body. Then it sort of morphed later on into anti-aging. And then people like preventative, regenerative aging, longevity medicine is now coming to the fore. and of course, the absolute buzzword of the moment, biohacking.
Mm.
Uh, but what they all do, what the purpose at the end of the day for all those terminologies is the same thing. How do we control our biochemistry in order that we age well, live long, and stay disease free?
Mm.
You know,
'Cause
that in a nutshell is it.
it feels like it's the $64 million question, isn't it? Is how do we beat aging, or the ultimate thing is beat death, isn't it? I think that's the question with anti-aging. And well,
I,
I mean, there's plenty of guys out there who spend a fortune trying to extend their lives as long as they can. Do you remember that American politician? Oh, what was his name? It was oh, I'll come back to it. He was running at the same time as Bill Clinton as an independent, and he was an American businessman, made a fortune.
wasn't
Ross Perot.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So
Didn't he spend a fortune on trying to find out ways to beat aging?
there's on the quiet, there's quite a few people,
Yeah.
very, very well known people who are doing it. I'm going to forget their names now. Who's the guy that owns Amazon? Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos, yeah.
Very quietly doing stuff. With Google themselves, they have a branch called Calico,
Mm.
that is involved in aging research. The Buck Institute was founded with $1 billion grant from a lady on a deathbed. There are some very big organizations who are doing this. One of the problems, of course, with the classic gerontological geriatric medicine institutes, I mean, Britain has one, the Americans have one, of course. But my mentor was an American doctor by the name of Ward Dean, who anyone can go and look up. And he got the most amazing CV. But he was into this when it really was unfashionable,
Mm.
now 80 years old, actually. Um, he also wrote the Smart Drug series of books. So if we talk about nootropics later,
Yeah.
that Ward's name will come up. But he used to say to me, he was bored with the sort of government institutions because after decades of research and spending, many hundreds of millions of dollars, they had discovered the optimal distance to a bus stop and the optimal distance for a geriatric person to step onto the bus. It wasn't getting to the core. He used to always say, if they carried on treating aging the same way we treated polio, they'd have the most amazing robotic, vessels that polio victims could move around and walk around in. You know, it's not getting to the core of the problem.
Mm.
We've got to get to the core of the problem. Um, and although today, it's still, of course, a complicated problem and nobody really knows exactly why we age and what happens. There are many aspects of aging that we're really beginning to understand and be able to do something about. So that's where it is. And whether or not we get into any stories of some of the things we've discovered over the years, that I think a lot of people, if they heard them, would say, really, I can't believe it. They could really do that. But there's a problem with the system, as I think we will discover.
Yeah, it's like death is the great equalizer, isn't it? It's like these incredibly powerful men like Jeff Bezos, who've accumulated billions and billions of dollars, still can't beat the thing that equalizes all of us, isn't it? So they can't take their wealth with them, and it's the one thing that we have in common as peasants, with people like Jeff Bezos. And I find it a really fascinating subject in terms of you know research into anti-aging. It seems like it's the antithesis to the big pharma business model because,
Mhm.
they don't want to keep us around for a long, long time. What do they call it? Useless eaters. Once we get past a productive phase in our lifespan and, we're just retired and enjoying our leisure time, the clock is ticking for people like big pharma and governments because they want us off the plantation.
Mm.
Now, I've done quite a bit of research into big pharma and its origins, and it took me back to the latter part of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century, where we saw a transformational revolution in medicine when Rockefeller and Carnegie decided to bring the industrial monopolies to bear upon the medical industry and just totally transformed it. And I know that's something that you find yourself in resistance to the big pharma machine. So maybe you could tell us, what you know about big pharma, its origins, its objectives, and what it's what the future holds for people who want to treat their health without having to negotiate this very risky, dangerous path.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. The bits I know, I got into this reading a fantastic book by a man I think is a hero, a man called Edward G. Griffin. He's written many books, including the Creature from Jekyll Island, which I'm sure you'd be familiar with. But the one that I first read of his was called World Without Cancer. And it's in two parts. And the second part is the story of Laetrile or Magdalene, which is an extract from things like apricot kernels. You can also find it in apple seeds, and how it can improve cancer conditions. But the first half of the book, as I remember, was the story of how allopathic medicine, which is what we have today, came into being. And basically, it's the story, as you just said, about John D. Rockefeller and Carnegie getting together and forming a monopoly. One thing that Rockefeller did, uh, I think we know the story of his father. His father was literally a snake oil salesman.
Yeah.
He literally went round the Wild West selling snake oil, and he was a very nasty piece of work by all accounts. Um, and like father, like son, he came along. And of course, at that time, John D. Rockefeller was able to get into the oil industry. I believe his company was called Standard Oil. And he created a monopoly with oil. And of course, he became the first American millionaire. Now, $1 million in 1920,
Mm.
was very, very, he was a billionaire or more today, I'm sure. Um, and he suddenly realized that he could monopolize a lot of things. That oil wasn't the only thing he could monopolize. And by the way, although you can say, people might say, but yes, but eventually the American government cottoned onto him and they broke him up. Well, they did. The only trouble was he became even bigger after the breakup than he was before it. I don't quite know how he did it, but he did it very, very well. Um, and he's the one that he looked at various aspects. I mean, they looked into the media, for example, in monopolizing the media, but they realized that medicine was kind of an open game at that time. And they basically were able to, through money, they were able to encourage universities to only expound their teachings, which were selling their products. And the ones that weren't, and in those days, homeopathy was a very big thing. They basically were able, through various means, foul and otherwise, to push them out of the way.
Mm.
They sponsored the universities that promoted them. They put their people on the boards to make sure they kept to the program. And those that didn't, they starved them
Mm.
basically. And eventually, of course, through manipulating people in government, they were able to make their medicine the only medicine. And so as a doctor, you were trained in their medicine, you were licensed in their medicine, and if you deviated from that path, you'd either lose your license and your livelihood, or you might even lose your liberty. So that,
Incredible how it's a sprawling conspiracy, and it's not something you could just call a conspiracy theory, because there's actual evidence of this through the Fitzgerald report, which was run by the American Congress. I forget the congressman's name, but his son was diagnosed with cancer. His young son, 10-year-old. Rockefeller's medicine industry gave him a couple of years to live. The congressman went and did alternative medicine and cured his son. And he was like, well, what the hell's going on here? And he was able to lobby within Congress to do a report, to do an investigation on Carnegie Rockefeller monopoly. And they issued the Fitzgerald report, which said exactly everything you've just said, that they were part of a broader conspiracy.
over the years, I've had stories told to me, what we could say secondhand.
Mm.
I mean, if you're lucky enough to be firsthand, you're talking to that exact same person in the same room at the same time. But those things in life don't happen too often.
Mhm.
So if you've been secondhand, you're talking to the person who was in the room talking to that person. And anyway, a quick story for you that was told to me more than 20 years ago. Um, I'm going to mention his name. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but his name was Dr. Mark Rossellini, and he was from the University of Texas, very prominent, established, institution in Texas, of course. I think Austin, Texas, if I remember rightly, but I might be slightly wrong on that. And I was with him and we were chatting. And at that time, and I'm going back more than 20 years, he was really big into inflammation. And he was like, he's saying, look, inflammation is the key driver behind so many problems and diseases. If we look for inflammation, it's like an early marker of disease. And there are lots of things we can do to reduce inflammation, lots of nice, quite simple things to reduce inflammation. And so he actually told me this story. So he gave a lecture um, to a Senate subcommittee in Washington, DC, uh, probably in the late 90s now. And he was very warmly received. He basically showed his research. He said, "Look, this is what we found about inflammation. If we do, but now people know about inflammation. But 20 plus years ago, not so much."
Mhm.
Um, and they all very politely clapped and what have you. Anyway, afterwards, when they're all milling around with a drink and what have you, the senator for Texas, whose name I don't remember, but he was actually the oldest senator in the Senate at the time. So it wouldn't be difficult to find out who he was. He was
Mhm.
already then in his 90s. Came up to him, shook his hand, and one on one said to him, "You're a very, enthusiastic, knowledgeable young man, but we will never do what you want us to do." And Mark said, "But why?" And the reply came, "What you would do is destroy a $3 trillion a year business. What would we do with all the unemployed doctors and nurses?"
Mm,
That's the way they're actually thinking.
mm,
Okay. And you think, no, no, it can't be. There's a lot of frauds in this world, whether it's the banks or whatever it is, insurance, whatever it is, but never health.
mm,
Nobody would ever do that in health. There's a mental block on a lot of people because of that. Well, guess what? It is about money, like everything else is. And they like Luddites. They don't want to change the system because they can't see not only would be healthier, but actually, in my opinion, it would actually create more work, not less.
mm.
In the same way that when they wanted to smash up all the mills because they said we've got to make handmade clothing, not machine clothing, more work was actually created because they could mass produce clothing. So, and I think actually, if we get into preventative medicine, although it would be a fundamental change in the way things are done, yeah. When do we see a doctor? Let's put it this way. When do we go and see a medical professional now? When we feel sick,
Mm.
right? And how often do we feel sick? I don't know. Is it once a year, once a 5 years? What? Obviously, it depends on how old you are. The older you are, the more likely to go and see it. Anyway, it's not that often, is it? That's the point I want to make, really.
Mm.
Um, but if you were into preventative medicine, if it was done properly, would you not go along at least once a year for your preventative medicine operation? I actually believe that it's a complete change of thinking. It's a complete different approach to the way we do it now. But I actually think there'll be more people employed, not less. So
Yeah, it's a revolutionary way of thinking, isn't it? Is rather than going and treating sickness and the symptoms, is that you make sure that you're not sick in the first place by checking up on the body and making sure everything's in full working order. And if it isn't, then you can encourage it to repair.
I'm sure you've heard this before, but in ancient China, they actually would pay their doctors when they were well, and they wouldn't pay them when
When
they
they
were
were
sick.
sick, yeah.
Well, that puts
That's a
the
good one,
doctor
isn't it?
first.
Yeah.
Yeah,
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 that's a
that-
real incentive though. Well, that's, there's an incentive for preventative medicine from the doctor, isn't it? Because, they don't get any income when you're sick because they haven't done the job.
exactly.
Yeah,
That's brilliant when you think about it.
it is. Yeah. I mean, let's try and introduce that model into big pharma. I mean, but you're right about, when you talk about the $3 trillion industry is, the way that when big pharma has created this obscene monopoly, in which medicine and healing people is not part of the business model, is keeping people sick, is where they make their money, not from curing people,
Managing. It's managing disease and not just enough. I mean,
and even creating disease because,
we,
there's
yeah,
something to treat then, haven't they?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a number. Iatrenic is the term.
Mm,
If you ever hear a doctor say it's an iatrenic issue, you go, "Oh, no, what that?" What it means is I've caused this problem, or the medicines he's on or she's on have caused this problem.
mm.
So it's an induced program. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's all, and the patent system doesn't help. I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
therapeutics. I think we've made enormous advances in sort of, you had a broken bone or something like that and bits of surgery. You could say, I've got two stories here. One came from a brilliant doctor, a guy called Jonathan V. Wright. He's an American doctor. He's written many books. He runs a very large clinic in Tahoma in the Washington state. There's like 200 other people working for him. And he's brilliant because he gets him and his university team go down the libraries of Seattle and they read all the old stuff that everyone's, because it's not online. Most of the world's stuff is not online. About 10-15% is online. And he rediscovers things. And he once said on stage, said to the audience, he said, how far, when you think about it, medicine has to be behind the literature, right? Because R&D is always going on. So you would never be, so how far behind the literature is it? Okay. And this is what he said on stage. He said, what do you think of surgery? And people, oh, wonderful what they can do now, keyhole surgery, blah, blah. He said, yes, I agree with you. He said, what do you think about therapeutics, particularly for degenerative disorders? And there was, and he said, okay, I'm going to ask a question here. How far behind the literature do you think therapeutics are? And people said, oh, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years. Somebody from the back says 20 years, And he says, well, they're good guesses. He said, I'll tell you what I think how far behind we are. 100 years. 100 years.
So
Right.
the literature, as in the research that's conducted by doctors who are at the cutting edge of medicine. Yeah. And when you say therapeutics, what do you mean by therapeutics?
Well, the therapeutics is like drugs, supplements, anything to, injections, whatever you want to use to get into the body. And he went on to say, but surgery is just a few years behind the literature. And he said, how can this be? There's no governing body of surgery. Surgeons more or less get together and discuss and internalize and say, well, last time I opened the patient up, this happened and that happened. And they more or less can, I would say, do what they want to do, but they within certain parameters. But of course, there's a very strong governing body behind therapeutics. In the UK, it's the MHRA, the FDA, of course, in the United States. And, the trouble is, just go back to the FDA, because obviously it's the elephant in the room. On average, it now costs nearly $1 billion to approve a new drug. $1 billion, right?
And when you say approve, that has to go through the FDA.
Yes.
And the FDA is owned by Rockefeller's originally, was it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the pharmaceutical companies have huge interests within the FDA.
Yeah.
And it's like a revolving door. So the moment that the head honchos of the FDA retire or leave that, they've done their 5-year stint or whatever, suddenly they're on the board of one of the big pharma companies on $500,000, $1 million a year, or whatever it is. And they only have to come in on a Wednesday morning. So, you know what I mean?
So would you say the FDA is the enforcement arm of the Rockefeller Carnegie medicine monopoly? They're the ones who say you can get through or not.
Well, it's a bit, the German philosopher Goethe once said, none is so imprisoned than those who think they're free.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's what we've got, because on one hand, if you're Joe Blow, member of the public, you look at the FDA and you say, well, they're the governing body. They're ensuring safety. They're making sure that these drugs work. And if we need something like that, that's a good thing. But actually, they're the poachers turned gamekeepers, and they're protecting the interests of those who they're being funded by. And the funding is enormous. With $1 billion required to approve a new drug, which small organization could get into that field? And the problem with that is the first question the pharmaceutical company will ask, let's say a researcher comes along to a pharmaceutical company and says, I have a cure for cancer. You swallow this tablet and cancer goes away. You might think, gosh, I have lots of questions for that person. Yeah, they will. But I'll tell you what the first question will be. First question will be is, can we patent it? Because if you can't patent it, everybody will sell it.
Well, that's interesting because taking us back a little bit again to the introduction of the pharmaceutical industry, when they discovered that pharmaceuticals could be made from oil and stuff, but they couldn't patent natural remedies. They could only patent pharmaceuticals because they created them. So
Yeah,
that was the beginning of the monopoly, wasn't it? Because there's no money to be made in natural cures.
exactly.
Yeah.
You
Uh,
take a use patent. So let's take fig juice for as an example. If you wanted to go out there and say, I'm going to prove to the world that fig juice cures constipation, right? And you're now going to get backing, you're going to try and raise what might be tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars to go and do these studies and one thing and another. At the end of it, you prove that fig juice cures constipation, right? You can have a use patent. Your fig juice can sell and say cures constipation on the bottle, right?
yeah.
But the problem with that is that while it's on the shelf, all the other bottles of fig juice that are around it can't make that claim, but they don't have to recoup $300 million in research money. So your bottle is 45 quid and everyone else is £2.50.
Mm.
So that's why they're not interested in a use patent. They want a blanket patent. They want to be able to say, nobody can sell fig juice, only we can sell fig juice. So just to give you that as an example.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's pretty heavy. So, you know, it
There needs to be a change.
yeah.
I mean, I'm not admonishing. If you want to go out and do the research and you do all this effort and time and all the rest of it, and you prove something, you should be rewarded. I'm not saying that for a moment. But there needs to be another way of doing it where, you know,
But it seems the research is burdened with layers and layers and layers and layers of regulations in order to keep the riffraff out, or in order to keep out independent researchers who just want to do the experiments without all of the bullshit that goes with it. I mean, there's an example of a guy called Brzezinski. He had a research institute, isn't he? Where he was a fantastic researcher, amazing guy, and decided, even though he was offered tenure at one of the famous universities, he said, no, I'm going to remain independent. And was developing a cancer drug, I think,
yeah,
and went on for years, but, it was thwarted in the end.
he's actually the only doctor, an independent company, as it were, in the United States that actually got a drug through.
Wow.
He actually did. I did meet him once, and met his wife a few times as well. But I don't remember how he did it now. But he actually remains to this day the only independent person that has had a drug approved by the FDA.
But he
Yeah,
didn't meet he met a sticky end, didn't he? Didn't they raid his offices and took something like 200,000 confidential documents, the FDA and whoever it was that was working?
they all go through hell. Jonathan Wright, who I mentioned earlier, FDA officials came into his office some years ago, many years ago now, guns drawn,
Mm.
and pointed them in the face of his secretary, apparently, and people sitting in the waiting room in wheelchairs, right? And said, and stopped him giving vitamin B injections. It was all over vitamin B injections. He actually also, just to add another little story that is sort of funny, peculiar, and funny, ha ha at the same time. Um, he at one stage was giving a money back guarantee to reverse macular degeneration. How many doctors give a money back
Yeah.
guarantee? They came in,
Yeah.
they said,
That's why they've closed them down, isn't it? Yeah.
I said to him, you cannot give a money back guarantee.
Mm.
I turned around and said, why not? What's wrong with giving a money back guarantee? And they said, it's unfair to the other doctors who can't give one.
Yeah, who can't perform. Back to the Chinese model again, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But what a terrible, terrible stain upon humanity that we are faced with this, obscene institution known as Big Pharma, and who are blocking our health, or worse, and giving us diseases and making people suffer. I mean, what a terrible, terrible stain upon our civilization this organization is. It's just a mafia, isn't it? It's just a total
Well,
mafia.
what is, on one hand, you could say, well, they're doing their best and all the rest of it. But let's have a little quick look at history and go back not so many years. 1971, Nixon stands up and says, the last decade was the moonshot, and we got to the moon. We landed on the moon in 1969. This decade, 1970s, will be the war on cancer. Before the end of this decade, we will defeat cancer. He's on YouTube.
Mm.
Go and watch it, black and white. And they put enormous resources into the war on cancer. So here we are, fast forward now, 50 years. How's that going?
Well, it's probably worse than ever, isn't it? Cancer rates.
Well, I'll give you a few stats. 1 in 2 of us will get cancer in our lifetime.
Terrible.
Okay. Let's just take the United States, because that's allegedly where the war on cancer started. Every year in the United States, 600,000 people will die from cancer. Okay. And you can say, well, they're a population of 360 million. We'd expect that. Okay. But let's put that into perspective. 600,000 people every year is more people for Americans that died in the First World War, the Second World War, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War put together.
Wow. That
Right?
puts it in some perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what hope do we have, in terms of how do we move forward? How do we defeat this terrible monopoly that they have over our health? Because that's a real means of control, isn't it? It's a real means of control is to control our health, and now with the Great Reset and Klaus Schwab, and we're hearing more and more about transhumanism and cyborgs and the Great Reset diet. It doesn't feel like they're slowing down. In fact, it feels like they're speeding up and taking us to this new brave new world that they're longing to do. What are your ideas, or what have you heard about what's the prognosis for the future?
Well, I think in terms of the hope, the light at the end of the tunnel, it's good that people like yourself and your audience are waking up
Mhm.
and thinking for themselves, because that's what we all need to do. We need to start questioning everything that comes down the pipeline from these people and not take it for granted. One of the challenges we have in the UK is that the NHS dominates medicine.
Mm.
Something like 95% of medicine in the UK is via the NHS. And unfortunately, and in a way I can understand it, because everyone's paid taxes, they've paid into the NHS, but they perceive it as being free. I get ill, I go to the doc, I get my treatment, it's free. But at the same time, you're only going to be doing what that institution will allow you to do. You're not free, you know, I could tell you a rather horrible story from here. When my mother was dying of pneumonia at the age of 96 and she was on her way out, I pleaded with them to give her as much vitamin C as possible. And I went through over 3 hours of conversation with their doctors, and it was unbelievable. They just do, because they kept saying it's not evidence-based medicine, which is laughable. But what they meant was it's not approved.
Yes, not
That's
approved. Yeah,
a
yeah.
totally different story. In the end, they gave her a very small amount, but it was too little, too late. I won't mention which hospital it was. It was a well-known hospital in Buckinghamshire, but they literally, it was like close to midnight. They hadn't got any vitamin C in the pharmacy.
Mm.
I mean, you can't believe it. But that's my point here. It's mainly drugs. It's focused. You may know the story about the New Zealand farmer who got out of his coma.
With vitamin C, yeah.
Yeah. But again, they had to take to court to make the hospital give him vitamin C,
Unbelievable.
which also serves one prerogative of the code, which is first do no harm, right? The old
Hippocratic oath.
Hippocratic oath,
Yeah.
first do no harm. I wonder which oncologist can tick that box.
Mm.
So, what we need to do is educate ourselves. In the short run, the answer is educate ourselves. Unfortunately, it also means get access to private medicine, or what we might call complementary medicine. I'm not against all drugs. Okay. I'm not saying that if you've got pain, you don't take a painkiller, and there are, I think, some good drugs, in the toolkit, but there's a lot of BS in the toolkit as well. And you've got to be aware. I mean, you've probably been reading reports lately saying they're now coming out saying it looks like the antidepressants are useless. Here we are. What did Prozac came out I think it was the early 90s or mid 90s.
Well,
So
psychiatry, I mean, that's a whole other conspiracy in itself. And, the DSM, the way that they work in hand in glove, they'll create a new condition that's voted in. It's not in by any kind of empirical evidence. They
yeah,
literally vote in a new condition so that the big pharma can create a psychotropic drug to treat kids. It's unbelievable. It's
yeah.
unbelievable.
And that's again a failure of the system.
Mm.
They first of all have to have a quote unquote disease or disorder.
Mm.
And then when that's been blessed by the FDA and recognized, now you can create a drug for it.
Mm.
You know, So that's why they bring that in, because they'll say, well, we can't, there's nothing to treat. We haven't recognized. That's why aging isn't treated
Yeah.
per se, because they haven't recognized it as an issue by itself.
Mm.
So no, you're absolutely right. The system is skewed all the time and of course it's a one-way system. But when you look at the amounts of money that are involved, it's just
Eye-watering. Yeah.
I mean, coming back again, see in Germany, where I have a little bit of experience in, it's a slightly different system in that if you go into a hospital in Germany, I'm not quite sure how much of the bill you pay, but you pay a percentage of the bill, but you see the bill. So if you've had a week in a hospital in Germany, you will see what it cost for you to be in there. The government will pick up most of it. The local authority picks up a bit and you pay a bit, right? Something like that. And maybe insurance covers stuff, but you end up seeing the bill. Because of the NHS, we go and have our problems. We never see the bill.
Mm.
We've got no idea what it cost
Oh,
for
yeah.
us in that building. And yet, something, if you take chemotherapy as an example, the cost of the drug for a month is in the region of about 30,000,
Wow.
right? So that's just part of it. We're not talking about the professionals and the equipment and the building and blah, 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 blah.
Mm.
So there is a huge cost to all of this. And so I think the short answer is we have to educate ourselves. We have to, quote unquote, look after ourselves. And we have to look at what's being presented to us, whether they're vaccines or whether they are statins or whether they are antidepressants or wherever else, and say, is that actually right for me? And get other opinions. I think I always say to people, if you go and buy a new car, you're interested in a new car, what do you do? Do you walk into the first showroom you see and say, sell me a car? Of course you don't.
Mm.
But why do we do that in medicine? Why do we think one size fits all? In Turkey, where I also have a little bit of experience, what I love about the Turkish system, they use what they call complementary medicine. Okay. And what they're talking about is they're giving lots of nutrition alongside the drugs. And actually, that really helps.
Mm.
You could even argue it makes the drug work better.
Well, Hippocrates, the father of the Hippocratic Oath, said, "Let food be thy medicine," didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Two quick ones, because there's a lot of people out there on them. Metformin
Mm-hmm.
is a good drug for diabetes. Okay. It's very widely used, but there's a problem with metformin. It inhibits the uptake of vitamin B12. There's a book. It's called the Drug Nutrient Depletion Handbook. It's probably online now. I think every doctor should have one of those on their table. They don't learn nutrition. They do 5 years of medical school. They do 2 weeks on nutrition, and they're right in the early part of the game.
Mm.
The bit where you've just got to the university, you're trying to make friends, find out where the lecture room is, and most importantly of all, find out, when the bar opens.
Mm.
So, they don't remember.
No, I think they're starting to adapt ever so slightly because the internet is so dominant now, and bro science, right? Bro science, I think, is some of the best science. It's guys actually using themselves as the guinea pig. Whether it's the gym or whether it's the food they eat, they are the real scientists to me because they're using themselves as the lab, and
Some of them would try and stop that though, like
of course.
of your own body. There was a famous case some years ago in the UK where a new drug came out called Taxol, which is extracted from yew trees, and yew trees don't grow very quickly, right? So guess what? It was a very expensive drug. It was for cancer. And it was this kind of postcode lottery thing, where if you lived in that part of the country, they would say we'd allow it for you, but not for you because it's very expensive. Or if you were too old, I mean, Ceausescu, one of the reasons they put him up against the wall and shot him in the end was he told his doctors, if they're 60 or over, don't let them in the hospital. Send them home.
Useless eaters.
Useless eaters.
Yeah.
But, and with Taxol, the same thing was happening. It was literally, well, how old is she? Oh, she's 80. She hasn't got long to live anyway. Don't give her the drug. Anyway, this particular lady, she was a wealthy lady. So the local hospital had said, I'm sorry, you don't fit the criteria. We're not going to give you Taxol. She said, fine, I'll pay for it myself. And they went up in arms and they ended up taking her to court.
Wow.
To say it's unfair that she buys her own drugs. It's unfair to the people who can't afford it.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
You can't make it up, really.
But it brings us back to that. I think due to the fact that the internet is so dominant and people are open to trying things on themselves, be it nutrition and stuff, starting to see, doctors yield a little bit and started to talk about nutrition a little bit, even though they're not trained or qualified. There's one doctor up here that tells his patients to do a carnivore diet.
Oh,
He
okay.
he tells his patients to go low carb, right, in order to improve their health or supplement the drugs they may be taking. And that for me is quite revolutionary for a
Yeah.
GP in the NHS,
Yeah.
because it's a doctor actively taking part in nutrition. Whether that's right or wrong, I think it's definitely the way forward because just prescribing us big pharma, just prescribing us, statins or antidepressants or
Mm.
antibiotics without knowing what's going on. I mean, that model has to end.
It does. If you actually look at the word disease and stop and think about this is,
Mm,
or if you prefer, disharmony,
yeah.
right? Do you honestly think that if the body's got a problem, there's some kind of biochemical problem within the body? It's either lacking something
Mm,
or it's accumulated something. So in other words, there's too many toxins in the body, or there is a lack of something else in the body. And yet we think a drug, an alien substance that's been created by a pharmacologist somewhere, is going to be the answer.
mm,
Um, I view health as a pyramid in that, the base of the pyramid is obviously where most of the materials are. And that you could call that the common sense band.
yeah.
It's the, clean living, good food, exercise, that whole thing. But as we go up the pyramid, it gets more specialized. So, but I would say the next band on the pyramid, which I call the additional, is where you could make sure you get the right vitamins, the right minerals, the right oils, the right, you could do things like take saunas and sweat out toxins. There's all stuff that we could all do.
Yeah.
And then the next one up, I'd call the advanced, where you probably want a health professional working with you.
Hmm.
Notice I use the word health professional. I didn't necessarily mean medical doctor.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of other different people out there. But you could, America now using some hormones, bioidentical hormones, peptides are now coming to the fore. And at the very tip of the thing, we're going to have the specialist stuff like stem cells and things like that and medicines. But if you're not doing the point here is if you're not doing the base well, regularly, often, you don't actually think the tip on the top of the pyramid is going to stay there very long. It's
Yeah.
not going to fall in, crumble into the ground.
Yeah. Oh, it's true. It's true. You got to look after yourself, haven't you? If you want other people to get involved in looking after you too. But let's move a little bit over to what you were talking about there with peptides, because that's something that I find really interesting. I don't know much about them, but I'm learning more. But what I do find interesting is that they have come from Russia. Now, Russian the Russian pharmaceutical industry took a completely different path than the one in the West, didn't it? And it's
Yeah.
far more trustworthy because it's not got this Rockefeller monopoly that is on top of it. They seem to still have the interest of the patient at heart because I think about a year ago, year and a half ago, I did some research into fasting,
Mm,
specifically dry fasting. Right?
mm,
And Russia leads the world in research on fasting and dry fasting, water fasting and dry fasting. And I did a little bit of research into the Russian pharmaceutical industry or Russian medicine, and I was really, really impressed.
mm,
Really impressed in the research and the results that they were getting that are finally starting to be shared with the West as more and more of their studies become translated into English,
mm.
specifically in this case, fasting. Dr. Filanoff, a doctor that's been treating his patients with dry fasting, no food, no water, for 25 years and is having incredible results. Finally, his work's being translated. So that, something that attracted me. And when I found out that peptides were the creation of, come from the Cold War,
Mm.
in terms of trying to help Russian soldiers who were in weird situations with nuclear power and stuff like that. That caught my interest too. And of course, nootropics,
Yeah.
an amazing little field of, biohacking also was a product of Russia. So tell us a little bit about that, because I know that you've got your IAS is the business you've got, and you're putting on a conference in
Mhm.
Luton in September, is it?
Right,
Yeah.
end of September, Lawrence. Yeah, it's called the Profound Health Summit, and we've got people coming from all over the world, including some of the Russians. And I know it's unpopular at the moment because of the Ukraine situation, but we're not ignoring science and engineering and all the rest of it.
No.
The one thing that the Russians/Soviets always had is they've always had a very strong, over there, personalities, celebrities are not a very high status, but the high status they have is for scientists, doctors, and engineers. And I take my hat off to them for that. And I've been lucky enough to be working with the St. Petersburg Institute for Biogerontology for quite a few years now, which is headed by a man called Professor Vladimir Kavinson. And he was the man during the Soviet times who the Kremlin approached because he was in the medical corps. He was a colonel in the medical corps. And they approached him and said, find something that our troops, our cosmonauts can use to protect themselves against nasty battlefield weapons. There was a laser weapon that if it was shone across the battlefield would blind anyone that saw it. These things, I mean, thankfully it's never been used, but these things still exist. And also they had people who were, this is not really unsurprising, who were deteriorating on nuclear submarines and in nuclear missile silos. They were aging fast, literally. And you could at least say the government at the time, the Kremlin at the time said, do something about it. And he had enormous resources at his disposal. And in a nutshell, what they discovered, they went down blind alleys, they didn't come up with this straight away, but they discovered and they published that short chain peptides are made of amino acids. And once you get two amino acids conjoined, it becomes a peptide. That's called a dipeptide, actually. But these particular ones, they're very short. They're either 2, 3, or 4 amino acids. And they find in foods. You find different ones in different food groups. Of course, there's an enormous variance because there's all kinds of amino acids and they can be in different positions and the rest of it. So, you start doing the math and it blows up into the thousands. But what he discovered is that these short chain peptides that are in our food are gene switches. They're instructions to our body, to our stem cells, to our DNA to go and fix something or regenerate something. So, hence the old adage, we are what we eat.
Yeah.
And we all know that we have to eat a kind of cross plethora of natural foods. And of course, we're getting different vitamins, different oils, different fiber, different, minerals from these foods. And that's part of the equation. That's the building blocks. But we're also getting instructions. And so Kavinson and his team and it's called Peptides in the Epigenetic Control of Aging. That's been his masterpiece on this. And he's been put forward for the Nobel Prize on this, by the way. That is fundamental. It's but in the West, it's hardly known about. And so what they've been doing, they've been using these in different applications, and they've even used them in their Olympic teams. They're not a banned substance. Well, not yet anyway. And they've even, and of course today they are available either through clinics over there or as food supplements, actually registered as, because here's the other amazing thing, having been used over 1 million times, no serious side effects.
So I know there are like multiple different types of bioregulator peptides, and you can get one for testosterone, for thyroid, for pineal gland. What would be the benefit of, taking them? So let's say, for instance, you wanted to increase your testosterone or normalize it. Is that why you would take a bioregulator peptide?
In a nutshell, but it will never take you to superlogical levels. So as you've mentioned testosterone, if there are any bodybuilders listening, they're going to be disappointed because it will only normalize your testosterone. And if you're already too high,
It'll bring it down.
It brings it down.
Well, right now we're faced with, in the West, a collapse of testosterone in men. The lowest testosterone levels we've ever seen recorded. So maybe in those situations, could peptides rebalance?
Yeah, I think that
testosterone.
We could look at the reasons. Yes, the answer is yes. It's going to help improve a middle-aged man, let's say, low in testosterone, and it's going to be low anyway. Just aging takes it right down for being a teenager.
Well, then again, that's the question, isn't it? Why is aging doing that? That's what we're here to try and figure out.
Exactly. But it'll help to improve it. Now, there is I'll say a caveat. There's something I really hate about the approach to testosterone. There's no doubt in my mind, a man has an andropause, right?
Yeah.
We're all familiar with a woman's menopause. because it's dramatic. Within a year or two, her estrogen levels will plummet, her progesterone levels will plummet even more. And we see those changes in them. And what happens? A man's andropause is slower and is not quite so dramatic. But nonetheless, if you're on the phone, if you answer the phone and you don't know who it is, and let's say there's an 80-year-old man, you know from his voice that he's an older man straight away. His voice might be feminized.
Yeah.
It's low testosterone. Okay. There's so many different aspects to this. So the peptides will help to normalize, but they will never take it over to it will not go to superlogical level.
So how does the peptide work? What's the mechanism of, what is the supplement? Is it an animal derivative? I mean, what's going on?
The original ones were bovine extracted from the glands, from the tissues of those animals, and they're from calves. They're from young ones, not old ones. There are now synthetic copies of them. So those who are vegetarians and don't, we're talking very small amounts. And we're talking also, I want to point out that the peptides, the molecules are so small, they're what we call subdalton. They can never carry a prion. You're not going to get mad cow disease from peptides because the molecules are simply too small. But I just wanted to say one quick thing about testosterone, if I may, Lauren.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But, a lot of men out there, they're of a certain age, might say, oh, well, my doctor's told me I've got, an enlarged prostate, and it's testosterone that's driving it. And the trouble with that is, I tried to think of an analogy to this just the other day, and it's not a very good one, I don't think. But it's a bit like, let's say you're driving your car down the road and one of the tires blows out and you realize it, whoa, whoa, whoa. And the car's driving badly all over the road. And you go to the mechanic and say, what's happened to my car? It's not driving right. And the mechanic says, it's your engine. We've got to switch it off. What? Well, why? Well, if the engine's off, it won't drive that wheel anymore, and then it won't wobble all over the road. And that's what the testosterone approach to prostate is. It's the byproducts of testosterone that are driving the prostate, and it's principally estrogen. So in a man, as we age, there's an enzyme in us called aromatase, and it's principally in fatty cells. So yes, if the fatty you are, the more likely you are to have higher aromatase levels. But its function in a man's body is to convert testosterone into a form of estrogen called estradiol. And as we get older, so a 60-year-old man is quite likely to have higher estradiol levels than a 50-year-old woman because her estrogen levels are going down and his estrogen levels are going up.
So she turns into a man and he turns into a woman. God.
So if you understood, and there's other byproducts of testosterone as well. But if we understand that is it the testosterone? Well, coming back to my car analogy, is it the engine? A man, in my opinion, having a healthy testosterone level for an older man does more for him than anything else he can do.
Is this why we've seen such, a push at the moment for TRT, the testosterone replacement therapy, as being an amazing remedy for men who have had a collapse in their testosterone levels?
And the other thing, yes, it is. And I think the other thing you've got to take into account is, am I getting really testosterone? Or am I getting a drug that looks like testosterone but isn't? Just to go back to the ladies for a moment, again, another book by Jonathan Wright, who I mentioned earlier, called Don't Let Your Doctor Give You Horse Urine. And funny title, but when the ladies get a lot of the estrogen, HRT, like Premarin, it's actually extracted from horse urine. Okay. And I won't bore you with the story, but that's how it started in the 1920s and 30s. Well, guess what? We can synthesize what's called bioidentical. In other words, exactly the same as human. Well, guess what? Horse estrogen is not exactly the same. It's not bioidentical. And so what actually a lot of these ladies, the problems these ladies are going through are not caused by the HRT per se. They're caused by the fact that they're not being given a bioidentical molecule. And the simple question to ask yourself is, this lady has had copious quantities of estrogen flowing through her body since she was a teenager. and never caused her an issue. But why suddenly, when the doctor gives her HRT, is she having all these problems
Mm.
and all these increased risks of cancer? And as Jonathan White would say, he said, because we're not mimicking nature. We've either not given the right molecule, we've not given the right dose, or we've not timed it correctly. And that's the greatness of Jonathan Wright and his approaches. So coming back to the men, if you understand ways to boost your testosterone, but also protect yourselves from increased estrogen, and there's a couple of really simple things we can do. I'd be pleased to hear. The number one way to get estradiol out of the body is to use a substance, and I'll explain where it comes from, called diindolylmethane or indole 3-carbinol, okay, DIM or I3C to give it an abbreviation. They are ingredients found in brassica vegetables, Brussels sprouts, bok choy, cabbage, all that sort of stuff. So something you could do very simply is eat lots of fresh regularly. Every day, eat a different brassica vegetable.
Mm.
And you will be urinating out
Estrogen.
estradiol.
Well, that's what bodybuilders do, don't they? That's a constant battle as they take more and more testosterone. They have to control the estradiol, the E2. Yeah, and they take aromatase inhibitors.
Yeah, they probably take a drug like Arimidex or
Yeah.
there's lots of approaches. There's lots.
So
of different-
so the Arimidex will control the increase in
well, that block.
because they get something called bitch tits, don't they? They call it because
That's right.
too much estrogen gives them breasts.
There's another byproduct as well, which is called DHT, which is dihydrotestosterone. And some people think that is also a problem for the prostate and stuff. And again, there's a substance called
DHEA.
well, DHEA is a hormone
Oh.
that hormone produced by the adrenal glands. That has a mild effect in increasing testosterone. By the way, DHEA is a controlled substance in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
Right.
But it's not in America, is it?
Oh, in America, you walk into Walmart
Yeah.
and you buy it without prescription, but but here in the UK it is. And
But DHEA and
tell you a story
DHT,
about that.
are they precursors for testosterone?
Well, that's an interesting question. You put it like that. Let me just do a very, very quick biochemistry lesson, if I may. And something I think everyone needs to be aware of, okay, and gets forgotten about. So the liver produces cholesterol, right? People say, oh, we get cholesterol from food. That's true. But believe you me, it's a small percentage. I doubt if it's more than 5, maximum 10% of cholesterol comes from food. So, 90+% is coming from our liver. So why? What is all this cholesterol doing flying around in us? Well, our brain is 50% cholesterol. Let's start there. But what cholesterol does, it is I can't think of the word at the moment. It's a matter of me. I was going to say cleaved. It's metabolized. It's methylated. Thank you. I knew it'd come to me in a second. It's methylated into other chemicals. So if you thought of a tree, it's a good way to think of it. I call it the hormone tree. The absolute base of that root is cholesterol.
Yeah.
Okay.
So cholesterol makes all hormones.
Exactly. Every single hormone in our body has been derived from cholesterol. Now, the very early ones, right? The first one is actually a substance called pregnenolone.
Yeah.
And then from there, it branches off. It depends on what vitamins we have. It depends on what enzymes we have. Because, I know it sounds silly, but it's up to us to eat the right things to do this work. And that's another problem, and then we could get into why do people have high cholesterol levels, some of the theories. But and DHEA is also quite an early one down there. Okay. So, and then from there, it branches off. So if you take DHEA, you will get a mild increase in testosterone because one of the pathways is to testosterone. Women actually will get a better improvement in testosterone than men.
Interesting.
Okay. And DHEA also happens to be the most abundant sterone in human blood normally. So it's common in us. But again, as we get older, it's one of the hormones that declines. Not all my hormones decline, but it is definitely one of the hormones that declines. So, but DHT is a byproduct of testosterone, and you can help to reduce that by one natural substance. Of course, there are drugs, but the natural substance, and I'm going to mess up the name here. Erythritol I probably said that wrong. I'm
Better you than me.
yeah. But it's nettles. It comes from nettles. And I know a lot of guys who drink nettle tea.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
Quite simple. So there are different, as long as you're conscious that you could be doing things in your daily lives, with your diets or with supplements, natural supplements that will help you keep you on the right path. But in my opinion, when I've heard men tell me, oh, I'm on an androgen blocker because my doc's worried about, they all say the same thing. I feel like shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Okay, because I think, I think you're right. I think this collapse in testosterone is a really important issue. We've got to understand why it's happening.
yeah.
Is it environmental? Is it, disease? What the hell's going on? And
But,
if testosterone is so critically important for men, masculinity, manhood, what can we do to combat this collapse? How can we improve it? How can we increase it?
well, I could be controversial here. And I want everyone to understand that I'm speaking from the science and I'm not making any social judgments whatsoever. But it's well known that the plastics that are in the environment from everything,
Mm.
from every, that we're just loaded with plastics everywhere. And they become pseudoestrogens. They act like pseudoestrogens. And so all of us have got too much plastics inside us. We're drinking from plastic bottles and we have water where our food is wrapped in plastic. If you're unlucky enough to wearing one of those nappies during COVID, and it's already in your lungs and so on and so on and so forth everywhere. And it's well known, that WHO and other UN have done numerous reports that in aquatic life, they even seen species of fish and even some alligator type animals change sex.
Wow.
Okay.
What did
Now,
Alex Jones say? There was gay frogs, didn't he? That's what he said. And he got
sorry,
criticized. He got everyone ridiculed him. But reality is, as we're seeing,
it's changing us.
yeah,
And also the Germans to come back. When I hear people say, "Oh, it's a waste of time buying bottled water," but why would I buy mineral water when I've got a tap, in the house? And I say, well, actually, I don't drink tap water. And they said, well, why not? And I said, well, for a number of reasons, I said, but the one that really drove me to buying mineral water, and ideally from glass bottles, there are certain plastics now I understand will not leach peripheral A, which is the thing in the plastic that gets into the water. The Germans some years ago, they randomly went to all their states and they went to different taps or faucets, if we have any Americans listening, and they took samples of water and they tested it. And in every single batch, they found traces of all the major drugs. So because of course, if the systems we have, we urinate back, we defecate back, it gets back into the municipal, and they clean it for all sorts of other things, but they don't have the processes to clean out these traces of drugs.
I don't drink tap water. I just drink distilled water now. Yeah, that's
Cool.
all I have.
Cool. But you know what the number one, so you can find, my joke is, that, yes, you could probably find Viagra in there. So now, right? But
If only.
statins, right? They're very widely prescribed. But what is the number one prescribed drug in the world? It is the contraceptive pill.
Wow.
And so what you're drinking, you're getting some estrogen, you're getting some progesterone, you're getting they're called endocrine disruptors. In other words,
A hormone cocktail.
a hormone cocktail.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So imagine you say, oh, but it's in the millions and even sometimes in the billions. And I say, yeah, but how often do you drink water every day? And how many years have you been doing that? And what happens when you give it to a baby? And what happens? You know what I mean? There's no end to it.
Well, but there's no end in sight to that either. I mean, that's so ingrained into the civilization now. It would take 50 years, 100 years to reverse it. So it's, that is the reality of our environment, and it's having such a detrimental impact upon us. We have to find ways to
Yeah.
protect the organism, don't we? Whether that's good health and nutrition or it's using supplementation.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Lawrence. I mean, first of all, you lead a clean life, right? You try and do your best in that department. but most of us still have to go to work and sit in traffic. We're not all living on the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, are
Yeah. Yeah.
we? So, life is life and we have to do what we can. I want to tell you a quick story about a brilliant man by the name of Professor Chris Exley. That's Exley. He was anyway, from the University of Kiel. And this is a man, a brilliant scientist, did his research, came to his conclusions, presented it, and then got lambasted because it went against.
Of course, the orthodox narrative. Yeah.
Exactly. And he is, without question, one of the world's greatest aluminium experts. Okay. What he doesn't know about aluminium is not worth knowing. So on the one hand, you'll say, okay, aluminium is the most abundant metal in the Earth's core. Yes, it is in our food. We will consume some of this. But what he found was, but he also explains, when you eat it, when you eat aluminium in your food as a natural, the body knows how to deal with it. When you inject it, it has no idea how to deal with it.
Mm.
And what is in every vaccine?
Aluminium is the main one, isn't it?
Right? Okay. I'll just park that one for you there. But he has very strong opinions on that. And he has voiced them, like Andrew Wakefield has voiced them, which is why he lost his position, just like Andrew Wakefield lost his position. Anyway, so he did another very interesting test. He got some different brands of mineral water. I'll tell you what they are if you want to know. And they were high in silica. They were high in silica. And what he discovered was that silica will detox or chelate, to use the correct word, aluminium. Okay. And he actually gave, I think, 2 or 3 liters a day of 3 brands that he found to be very high in silica. One was Volvic, one was the French one was Spritzer, which I believe comes from Indonesia, and another one was Fiji, where no guesses for where that one comes from. But of course, for us living in England, Volvic's easy to get, cheapest one. Right, so I'm up to tell you, in my household, we use it.
Use Volvic, yeah.
High in silica, detox aluminium. Chris gave 2-3 liters a day to Alzheimer's patients and had statistical improvement in them within 1 to 2 months. It's just drinking water, but drinking the right water. And this is where I'm coming back to if we educate ourselves and then we make these things part of our habit, just building them into our program, we're giving ourselves better chances than those people who don't. But unfortunately, he lost his funding. It's unbelievable. The story's online if you want to look it up. But, now they try and say discredit it.
Tell us more about this this conference that you've got going, because that sounds really interesting. And what's the main thrust of the conference?
Oh, thanks, Lauren. Yeah, it's the Profound Health Conference. It's taking place at the Luton Hoo Hotel, 30th of September to the 2nd of October, not far away. We've concentrated on peptides. It's called Hack Your Aging and Health with Peptides. It's not all peptides. We've got a couple of other subjects there. I'll be happy to tell you about them. But we got world experts coming in from Europe, from the States, from all kinds of places. And they're going to tell us about how they're using, what they're using, and what's happening. So in other words, it's not pure research. It's not conjecture. It's something happening somewhere in the world now. The first one I'll tell you about, because I think it has a very strong impact on people, is a surgeon by the name of Valero de Nicola. And of course, no guesses, Valero is from Italy. And he's been working with the University of Rome. They have published this. They have treated 2,000. Last time I spoke to him, he said they've done 2,000 patients. They followed up on 400 of those patients. And this is over a 5-year period. And what have they done to these people? What's the bottom line? All these people were told they were between the age of like mid-40s to mid-70s when they started. They were all told the same thing. They either needed a new knee or they needed a new hip. But rather than go and have that surgery and have a bit of plastic and titanium put in, they did his procedure, and I'll explain it in a moment. And none of them, after 5 years, have needed a new knee or a new hip because they regrew their own cartilage.
Wow. And how does that work? How's that? What's the secret?
Exactly. Exactly. You think this would be on the front page of every newspaper? Well, it's Rome, for God's sake. It happened. It's been going on for more than 5 years. So, of course, Valero will come and describe it. I'll very quickly tell you what it is. It is the mildest invasive procedure. Okay, I'm not saying there's no cuts for that. What they do is there's a discovery. So they take 10 milliliters of your blood, not much, 10 milliliters, right?
Nothing.
Very small amount. So they take that out, and overnight, and this is the where their work has really gone in. They effectively torture the blood. They heat it and they cool it, and there is a very specific process and all the rest of it. Why do they do that? Because what it does, this process does, is it will make your blood release something called heat shock proteins. And when it's finished, and I've seen some myself, it looks like a bit of red chewing gum, kind of tacky. If you've ever eaten that cinnamon chewing gum, I used to eat it.
Yeah, I used to like it. Yeah.
Okay. So like that. And what he'll do, you come back into the surgery. Let's say it's the knee. Now, this is where the surgeon needs to know his stuff. There are on the capsule of the knee, there are very specific points where there are concentrations of what's known as mesenchymal stem cells. Okay. They're kind of sitting there lying dormant, but these are the boys that somebody once described it to me like this, and I thought it was brilliant. Think of these stem cells as pupils coming out of school or university or whatever. They don't actually know what they're going to end up doing.
Mm.
They've been trained maybe, but they don't know. So, and a stem cell can turn into a nerve cell, can turn into a skin cell, can turn into a hair cell, can turn whatever. It can turn into whatever. The heat shock proteins basically are an instruction for them to get to work. So what they do, they've now got your heat shock proteins here. They've got your knee in front of them. He'll make half a dozen 3 millimeter. How small is that, right? Last time you fell off your bicycle, that was worse than that, wasn't it? So 3 millimeter cuts, very specific. It needs to be very specific. This is where the surgeon skill comes in. And then they reapply, they push in this, there's nothing else involved here. It's your blood, your heat shock proteins, right? They push them back in, and the nurse may put 1 stitch or so like that. You're in and out in an hour and a half. You go off and have lunch. Over the period of 10 days, there'll be no more pain. Over the period of 2 to 3 months, the cartilage will be significantly regrown.
Is that because the stem cells have been sent in with a job to do, and that job is to regrow as cartilage?
Yeah. It's literally an instruction. Somebody's come and knocked on the door and said, "All right, boys, get out, back to work." And it's our own bodies repairing. And this,
Couldn't that be applied to anything rather than just cartilage? I mean, because
well, yes,
stem cell is kind of like a neutral, isn't it? It's waiting to do some kind of job.
yeah. What this is fundamentally what these peptides are doing. They are basically there as an instruction to our fundamentally via the DNA. If you see the Russian studies where they show the DNA, particular part of the DNA, and then when the peptide comes, it's like a key. It locks on, click, click, like that, and it sends a message basically. And it's stem cells, of course, that go and do the repair.
So the peptides we were talking about earlier, they work in the same way as that procedure you've just described.
In a very similar way. I can't tell you if they work, if we get down to somebody who wants to do pharmacology on me, I can't say they work.
Yeah, but similar.
But in principle,
Yeah.
they are. It's been called regenerative medicine. I think it's the new name. And how cool is that our own bodies are repairing ourselves?
That should be, shouldn't it? That should be. It should be the body, detoxes itself and repairs itself. It's an amazing creation, isn't it? It's a truly amazing creation.
A lot of people have problems with joints. Imagine saying to them, because, having a hip operation is a major operation.
Yeah.
Your leg is taken off.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing we need to remember twofold, right? Whether it's a knee or a hip, twofold. One, let's say you have your knee done.
And that's mainly because of cartilage issues. That's the hip operation is mainly due to a breakdown in the cartilage.
There is another angle to it, which I'm happy to elucidate on. But I just wanted to quickly say, if you have one knee done, right, you will not walk the same. And guess what happens? You will put pressure on the other one.
Yeah, the other one goes next.
And the next one, and of course, you shorten the life of that knee.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, let's say you're a 50-year-old guy, I don't know, whatever, that you may need another one of these things in 10 or 20 years' time. Well, that's something to look forward to, isn't it?
Mm.
So it's a short term. I know it works well. I know people get great relief from it and all the rest of it. But the future of medicine is to regenerate ourselves. Like what I can tell you, Lawrence, is there is another thing that I learned from Valera about what goes on. So you've let's take the knee because it's a better example. So I'm sorry, I hope you're getting it. So you've got your top leg and your bottom leg, right? There's the cartilage surrounding the bone, and then there's fluid between the two, synovial fluid, which is a kind of, think of a shock absorber, really. It's kind of like a damper. And you want that to be quite viscous, that fluid. And the good news there is there are some good supplements that will do that. Hyaluronic acid. I always say to everyone, hyaluronic acid or hyaluronolan is very good for doing that. So you want a nice viscous fluid. So I did say to Valera, I said, so what happens? The pain, I guess, is when the cartilage touches the cartilage. And he went, no. He said, if that happens, he said that it's excruciating.
Yeah,
Right.
bone on bone.
Bone on bone. But apparently what happens is the first thing that happens is the cartilage, yes, there is some loss of cartilage, but it calcifies. It comes back to being over calcified, which is a problem for our arteries and all sorts of other things. Again, we could run off on that subject, but in this particular case, the cartilage has over calcified. And what's happened is within that cartilage, the nerves that are within that cartilage, they've been stretched to an unnatural position. And so every time we move a bit, ow, 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 and that's why it's uppermost in our mind. I've got to get this fixed. I can't, ow, ow, So what this heat shock protein treatment actually does, the first thing it does in the first, certainly within 2 weeks, is it softens the calcium. It decalcifies and softens the cartilage. And now the nerves go back to their natural position. So the first thing that happens is the pain goes away.
So he's going to be speaking at your conference.
It's
Fantastic. And is this open to the public? Can people buy tickets for it? I mean, where would they be able to
if
get
they
tickets
go,
for the event?
yeah, we've still got some left because it's not a big hotel. We're not,
Yeah.
not catering for 1,000 people. We'll be a couple of hundred at the most, I think. But also we wanted to make it intimate because we want people to learn.
Mm.
We know that people come to conferences to network and to learn. So if they go to the website, which is profound-health-summit.com, they'll see.
I'll put a link in the description. Yeah.
That they can do that. And we've still got some tickets left, so that's not a problem. And it's very intimate. What do I mean by that? Well, it's up to you whether you stay at the hotel or not. You don't have to. There are cheaper hotels down at Luton Airport if you want to. But if you go and look at Luton, you'll be impressed. It's a nice place. But if you stay at the hotel, it means we'll all breakfast together, we'll all lunch together, and we'll all dinner together.
Mm.
And that may be important to you because you might find, if you hear Valero's lecture, you might be sitting next to him at lunch and you just, oh, excuse me, do you mind if I ask you,
Mm.
and that's where the networking comes in. That's where, and we've got quite a few other people. We've got, we've got Professor Cavinson coming. He's going to tell us his discovery and what it means, how the cosmonauts use it and why, how the Olympic teams use it and why.
How the cosmonauts use what? I'm always interested in whatever supplements cosmonauts are taking, I want to take too, right? So what are they taking?
Well, yeah, it's okay. Well, I can't give you specifics, but one of the big problems with going out into space, into extreme environments and extreme exercise, I may say so as well, is you put a loading on your body. And what they found was it was taking these guys a long time to recover when they come back to planet Earth.
Mm.
Initially they thought, oh, it's weightlessness. But they put people in swimming pools for a year and they got out of the swimming pool and they went, well, I'm fine.
Yeah.
So they went, well, it's not that. So, and I know they do exercise now in space. I'm talking about guys that go up for long periods of time, but they actually give them, I can't tell you exactly which peptide. I've got an idea of some of the peptides and they recover. They get protein synthesis. They recover a lot more quickly.
Mm.
Now there's an American doc coming by the name of Bill Lawrence. And what Bill's been doing because when it was Soviet research,
Yeah.
one of the things you often say, oh, I don't believe it. Oh, because of the Cold War. Oh, we've got it. So what Bill did in America, he took 39 American patients, and this was over 3 years ago now. And he said, I'm going to give you what the Soviets did in this big trial, massive trial, thousands of people they did over many years. He said, I'm going to follow you guys for 3 years. Well, he's coming to Luton Hood to tell us what happened to his patients. And two fundamental, I happen to know a bit, of course, two fundamental things have happened to Bill's patients. Okay. One is they have all elongated their telomeres. They've got longer telomeres. Talk about what that means if you want. And secondly, they've all improved their DNA methylation. Now, the hottest topics right now in the world of anti-aging medicine are telomeres and DNA methylation. And they're both improved in their patients, in his patients. And of course, that has meaning, that has consequences. Again, you can get into that if you want me to, but
So tell me about telomeres, because I've done a little bit of reading on that. Isn't that something to increasing the length of the DNA? Yeah.
yeah, there's
And that determines how long you live?
more or less, that's correct. There's, oh gosh, there's lots of spin-offs here, but the nice, easy story, I did warn you, I think stories are a good way of
All right. Yeah, it's good. Doing good. Time's flying. Yeah, we're having fun.
On the end of our shoelaces, we have bits of plastic.
Mm-hmm.
They're called aglets. I didn't know that before I discovered somebody mentioned this to me. What do? Well, they keep the strands together, don't they? Because if you ever have a broken shoelace and there's no aglet on the end of it, they're useless. You have to go and buy another one, don't you? Well, on the end of the DNA and the chromosome, the telomeres are a cap.
To stop them fraying.
Think of it like an aglet.
Yeah.
And the longer they are, it seems to be that the healthier the cell is, whatever that cell is, and the longer the life of the animal. It's certainly been true in animal experiments. And to go to human studies, back in 2015, the University of Amsterdam took a number of, they're all ladies. They were all centenarians, right? So they were all 100 years and older. And they had one lady who was a super centenarian, and that means she was over 110. In fact, she was 130. And when we start talking about super centenarians on the planet, how many fingers and toes have you got? Because there's not more than that. That's how rare it is. Okay. Anyway, this lady was, and what they did every week, they drew a little bit of blood from these ladies, and they tested the blood to see the activity of their stem cells and the length of their telomeres. Okay. And what they found in every case was in the last 2 or 3 weeks of life, there was a dramatic reduction in telomere length, and there was a dramatic reduction in stem cell activity. Now, the big question is that cause or is that consequence? But as I say, there's a very strong focus on the length of telomeres in cells. Now, here's the great news. As I say, all Bill's patients have extended their telomeres, and it could well be because of the pineal peptide. If you start picking out certain peptides and say which ones are really special, there's no question in my mind the pineal's one. The pineal gland is very special.
I know, it's an amazing. I mean, you can go off in so many different directions with the pineal. You can go, DNA. You can go science. You can go extraterrestrial.
Yeah,
travel. You can do consciousness. I mean, and it's this tiny little gland, isn't it? It produces DMT when we sleep, doesn't it? And
third eye.
Yeah,
Right?
Melatonin. Is melatonin come from the pineal? Yeah,
Absolutely.
so an incredible little gland.
And melatonin, well, sorry, Lawrence, I did warn you that
It's okay. No, I'm up for it. Go for it.
So a lovely friend of mine is Dr. Walter Pierpoli. And Walter, he's knocking on a bit now, Walter. I don't think he'd mind me saying that. Of course, another Italian gentleman. He is a melatonin expert, okay? And he's written many books on the subject, so you can look him up. But he once said to me about the pineal gland and melatonin, and it stuck in my mind, again, stories. He said, Phil, imagine you have orchestra. You have orchestra and you have no conductor. What do you have? You have a noise. A noise. But now you have conductor. What do you have? You have a music. And that's how he described the pineal gland. And in a very simple way, when does melatonin come out of the pineal gland? At nighttime, or at
Yeah.
least in darkness. So if you go and lock yourself in the dark, in the cinema at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you start feeling tired later on, it can be because melatonin is coming out. So, but why does it do that? Because it's a signal to all the other endocrine glands. And of course, as soon as the sun comes up, melatonin goes away, stops being produced and goes away. It's a signal to all the other hormones. It's a timing. Otherwise, how does the body know when it's day and when it's night?
Mm.
Okay. And of course, the hormones, not all the different hormones will come out into blood at different times of the day. And most of them sort of come out first thing in the morning, which is that kind of get up and go impetus, get on with the day. So that's why it controls everything. So you could say every hormone in the body, in some respect, is under control of the pineal gland.
Pineal gland, because there's a brilliant podcast by a guy called Andrew Huberman, a doctor and a neuroscientist in America, West Coast. Really, really good podcast. And he goes into all these things we're talking about. He'll have whole podcasts just on them. And he is, one of his main focuses is sleep. He's saying, you must have control of your sleep if you want to have any hope of health, in the day. And he talks about melatonin quite a lot. And he talks about how you have to have it under control. And if we're up too late and we've got too many blue lights coming in, it just confuses the pineal gland, and it confuses, when to produce melatonin and not to produce melatonin. And he says that one of the best things you can do is, as soon as you wake up, is to go outside and just be in the outdoors for 10 minutes and expose yourself to sunlight, because that will switch off the melatonin and reduce it from your system. And he says, if you're the type of person, which I am, he says, if you're the type of person that wakes up during the middle of the night between 3 and 4 a.m., which I do, right? He says that what that's a sign of is that you're not producing enough melatonin and your body is waking up. Right. And it's a bit of a problem. So this is a real interesting subject for me.
There's, first of all, I'll say that naturally the biorhythm, melatonin is naturally highest in us between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. So they're probably the most critical times that we need to be asleep. So it's no good partying till 2 or 3 a.m. You should have, the old adage about every hour before midnight is worth 2 hours after. I'm sure you've heard that. The old mother story. But biochemically speaking, melatonin is highest between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. So that's what. The other thing, of course, is jet lag. The problem is, if you get on a plane today from the UK and you fly to New Zealand, and I picked that because it's 12 hours time difference, and you know how messed up you are. Well, they reckon that naturally we need 1 day to adjust for every hour time difference. So imagine you arrive in Auckland, you stay in Auckland for a week. You haven't even got on Auckland time yet. You needed to be there 12 days, and now you're flying back to London again. So, and that's why a lot of the pilots and the stewardesses and stewards that work on the planes are so screwed up. We have lots of ladies who work on the planes who their menstrual cycles all over the shop. They're in it, and fertility is an issue and all that kind of stuff. But it's melatonin that can help, because that was only a problem with jets. It was never a problem when you're on a boat. But that's absolutely true. A couple of sidelines to melatonin you may like. Look up the work of Dr. Thierry Hertog. He's from Brussels. His theory is unbelievable. He's like an encyclopedia. He's one of the most brilliant endocrinologists you'll ever come up. But he said a couple of things about melatonin that intrigued me. The first one is, the more sunshine you get in the day, the more melatonin you'll make at night.
That's what Huberman says. Yeah. So it's from that research.
Yeah, it could be. And the other one to watch out for is that caffeine will suppress your melatonin production.
Adenosine. Have you heard of adenosine? Yeah, the caffeine is what suppresses adenosine, and that's what helps us sleep.
Exactly. So there's a lot to melatonin. So, and by the way, there's Russian research. Again, there is one kind, you're absolutely right. You go in a bedroom or you go in a hotel room, let's say, and you look around you, and we've got loads of electronics, haven't we? We've got an alarm clock and a fire alarm, a diddly-dum, diddly-dee. If any of them have got blue lights, mask them up or switch them off, because that red light apparently not so bad, but the blue light is very destructive to melatonin. Any light entering the eye will destroy melatonin, with one exception that the Russians have discovered, and it's lunar light.
Nightly, yeah. So the moon.
Isn't
Yeah.
that? But you
Because
know,
we're not meant to be. No, we're designed, aren't we, to be outdoors in the day and under this moonlight at night kind of thing. We're not
and,
designed to be in these artificial cages that we're in with this artificial light.
and it's all energy, right? So
Yeah.
nature is wasting nothing. And I have to tell you this one other story about melatonin because
Yeah.
it's a bit, and these are the sort of stories, by the way, that we end up writing in our magazine, which is called Aging Matters. So if anyone wants to have a look at that, they can download free copies, aging-matters.com. And I have to tell you,
I'll put it in the link below.
thank you, because our audience is American, we don't put an E in aging.
Okay.
As my brother likes.
Apologies up front for that. Yeah.
So, because we're dominated by the Americans on this business, as it were. And as my brother likes to wind me up when I see him, he says, "Are you still doing the anti-agging?" But anyway, there's a guy called Reiter. That's Reiter, Professor Reiter, again from America, and his team discovered something about cancer, which I think is a real mind-blowing thing. They're probably 2 or 3 years old now. They discovered that tumors do not grow at nighttime. Tumors only grow in the daytime. And one of the very early suggestions as to why that might be, and it is known that melatonin is the most powerful antioxidant that our body produces, second only to cholesterol. Okay. Anyway, but it is. So is it but it's probably not just an antioxidant. I don't think that's its primary thing here. So what another doctor by the name of Frank Schallenberger, and Frank is out of Nevada, and you can find these guys on YouTube and you can watch them talk about it. And Frank is a very good YouTuber, speaks very well, whatever. And of course, here's a man who's seeing patients day in, day out, right? And so what they've done is they've given these cancer patients mega dosages of melatonin, mega dosages. Now, what is the normal nighttime dose of melatonin? If you were to ask me, well, it would depend on your age. It would depend on your sex. It would depend on.
Why would you take melatonin? Because your body's not producing enough of it, and therefore you're getting insomnia and these other things. I mean, is that the reason? Yeah.
Well, you could take it for jet lag.
Yeah.
That would be a short-term kind of thing to do. There's a good way of overcoming jet lag very quickly. You might take it for anti-aging purposes, because we do produce less melatonin as we get older. Or you might take it to address a problem, an issue. And in this case, we take cancer. But the dosages are very high. He wasn't.
When you say very high, what are they?
Well, they are 180 to 240 milligrams.
And what's the normal dose?
I would say between 1 and 3.
Okay. So that is a mega dose, isn't it?
Yeah. And maybe 6.
I'm a big fan of mega dosing,
Well, here's the thing as well, Lawrence, they're not just taking it at nighttime, they're taking it at daytime, right? And the first thing people say to that is, well, how come these people aren't zonked out?
Yeah.
What it is, it's 60 milligrams morning, 60 milligrams afternoon, 60 milligrams evening. And then some of them take 60 milligrams again at night. Okay. Not all the time, but they're taking it principally in the day. Why? Because if the tumors only grow in the day and it's melatonin, that's what they want to do. And according to Frank's work so far, he's saying his patients' tumors are great. I'm not sure he's seen the rest of them, but they're not growing. And here's
so the tumor, because they're taking melatonin in the day, the tumor thinks that it's nighttime because the melatonin's in the system. Yeah.
Or melatonin is having a direct action upon the tumor.
Okay.
Or there could be a number of concepts. It could be suppressing another hormone that's the trigger to this. There could be a whole bunch of different things here. But I think if you've got a tumor in you, it's good news to say, well, it isn't getting any worse, But normally, if you're a normal person and you were taking those kind of dosages of melatonin, I guarantee you will feel drowsy. Guarantee it. Okay. These people don't feel drowsy. Right. But when they start to regress their cancer, and I actually had a close family relative who's actually been in this position, and get rid of the tumor,
A little drowsy.
they start feeling drowsy on those dosages.
Really?
So bring the dose right back down again. So melatonin in the pineal is something special. And with the pineal peptide, we know if you take the pineal peptide, you help your body make more melatonin.
Okay, so the pineal peptide, that has the function of repairing the pineal or giving it fresh instructions?
I can't say it repairs it, but the gene switches that are involved with the pineal obviously tell it to start manufacturing
Doing something, yeah.
doing other things. I honestly, I would love to tell you it does repair it. I can't honestly say.
But we heard a lot on the internet about the calcification of the pineal gland. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah,
And you're meant to take ratfish oil, and the ratfish oil is meant to decalcify the pineal gland. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? And would the peptides have any benefit in that respect?
yeah. Calcification is a holistic problem,
Yeah.
whether, and of course we know that, yes, you're absolutely right. Calcification of the pineal is a big problem. I mean, this thing's only about pea sized.
Yeah.
It's not a big thing.
Mm.
And it's right in the center of the brain. So if you drew a right in the center of your forehead and at the top of your ears, that's exactly where.
Well, they say that two things happen in day 41 of gestation. I might be wrong on the day number, but I might be close. Day 41 of gestation is that sex is determined and the pineal gland appears.
Oh,
Yeah. So a
okay.
correlation, right? And they also say the pineal gland is the seat of the soul, and that
Yes.
it produces DMT when we sleep. That's what causes our dreams. And
Yeah.
apparently, when we die, the pineal gland releases a massive dump of DMT, or what's left of the DMT in the system, and allegedly that's how the soul leaves the body.
Well, yeah, I don't know how far down the rabbit hole.
Well,
I'm very open. I've never poo-pooed anything in my life.
yeah.
And sometimes I hear things and I say, well, I don't know whether that's true or not. I'll just park it.
Mm.
It's better than reading some crappy novel.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I just park it. So the one I like, that's interesting, because death, why do we die? I went to the most amazing conference.
Wow.
A few
Why do we die?
Why do we die?
Amazing. Yeah.
That's the question.
Mm.
And there was people speaking about different things there, and it was brilliant. But there is a known thing about the moment of death, and you're going to have to forgive me because I've forgotten the number, but a certain number of ounces of weight
That's right.
on the body.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not comparable.
The weight of the soul.
Exactly. It's not comparable to the air leaving the lungs, what's so-called death rattle.
Yeah.
It's more than that. I've forgotten how many ounces it is, but they know a certain number of ounces. So yes, some people say that is the soul, but hang on a minute. If you can measure the soul in weight, what is it?
Yeah.
And there is an answer.
Oh, wow.
And the answer is it's what's known as a high spin molecule. And there are several molecules on the planet that spin extraordinary rates. I believe palladium might be one. I might be wrong in saying that. Boron is one. White gold. I don't think of a jeweler's when they mix it and have a white. What the Egyptians.
Yeah. Yeah.
White gold is a high spin molecule. And
When you say high spin, do you mean like a clockwise direction?
Yeah, the electrons are moving at extraordinarily high speed.
Okay, right, okay.
And there's something really weird about them. They have done laboratory experiments with some of these molecules. They put them in I don't know what kind of gadget it is, but they put it in a container and then they change the temperature of that container, particularly when they heat it. And again, forgive me, I don't know what the temperature is when they get to, but there's a point when they change the pressure and the temperature in the chamber where the molecules disappear, where there's no weight, there's no.
They've gone to another dimension because of the speed of the spin. Yeah.
But when they bring the chamber back down to the ambient temperature or what have you, they reappear.
Reappears. Wow. Oh, that's
So
cool.
people are wondering, and there are high spin molecules in our brain.
So you're saying that it could be when we die and the soul, the weight of the body changes, and that the soul could be a high spin molecule that spins to another dimension.
We're off.
Wow. Yeah, I like that. That's a cool idea.
Thanks for the transport.
They say when if the pineal gland is the seat of the soul and it appears on day 41 of gestation, then that implies that that's when the soul enters the body, and
Okay.
that's when sex is determined. Is it male or female? You
Yeah,
know?
could be.
Yeah.
But it's still, everything is energy, right? If we get down to what Tesla tried to teach us, and even the great gurus, even the Buddhas of the world, and all the rest of it, or even Einstein to a point as well. I think understood this, but Tesla certainly understood it. Everything is a frequency.
Mhm.
Everything is vibrating. Every molecule has a different vibration, a different frequency. So what makes it a molecule? And then if you get down to looking, under the microscope, and you see the neutron, the electron, there is so much space between everything. How is anything solid?
Totally. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
What did they say to that? I mean, what is the answer? Because physicists can't even tell you what matter is anymore, can they? They don't even know.
well, you know what Stephen Hawking allegedly said on his deathbed
Mm,
when asked, "What do you think the universe is?" He said, "It's a hologram."
mm.
So, and I know Elon Musk has even made.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of reading into David Bohm, isn't it, and the holographic principle. Done a podcast on it. Yeah, fascinating subject. It really is. And
The work of Royal Rife.
yeah,
Oh,
I've heard of him. Yeah, the Rice machine.
yeah.
Yeah.
In the there was a man who made, in the 1920s or thereabouts, made the world's best light microscopes. They were he was, oh, what a man, what a man, what a wonderful thing he's come up with. You can start seeing everything. Even today, I don't think you can have a microscope that uses light
Mm.
that is better than a Rife microscope. But what he started doing as he was peering down his microscopes day in, day out, and watching all these different bacteria and, anything he could get hold of and have a watch of it and see what happened to it, he found out that by passing various frequencies through the Petri dish, he could kill them. He could watch these. So he could put, I know, E. coli in a Petri dish. And then he found a frequency that when he passed it through the Petri dish, he watched the little E. coli just explode and die. So he developed these gas tubes where he could put different, and he wouldn't, if there was one in the room here, apart from it flickering a sort of bluish light at you, you wouldn't feel it.
So it doesn't harm you. It just harmed the particular microbe.
Depends what frequency you set it to.
Ah,
And so his global idea was to develop massive ones of these and have them in the center of a town or something. And that anybody just in the town, within that 10-mile radius or whatever it might be, would be cleansing themselves of all these toxins.
what a brilliant idea.
But unfortunately for him, when he came up with this, as it was approaching the 1930s, our friends that you mentioned at the
Yeah.
wanted antibiotics on the market,
Yeah.
and they screwed him big time. They, if you go on fact checkers now, you'll see that he's disgraced.
So the Rice machine is still available though, isn't it? You can still buy
They
it.
are, they are about.
Yeah.
They're a good. I've been told by people who know a lot more on this subject than I did. There are good ones and there are bad ones.
Ah,
That
right,
golden
okay.
story in life, the devil's in the detail. But they can be found. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the final stage, because you're like me. We could talk about this stuff all night, right? So one of the other subjects that really interests me, and it's again something that you've got some experience and expertise in, especially with IAS, is nootropics.
Mhm.
Now, how I discovered nootropics is quite funny, because I was watching a film called Limitless.
Oh yes, yes.
Yeah, amazing film. Well, it is in the context of nootropics. And I was like, this idea in the film is that he takes this pill and it enables him to, you know, morph into this superhuman, the Ubermensch, if you like. He can think quicker, he can focus quicker, he can memorize things. He's like Neo in the Matrix. He's just operating faster than everybody else, and everybody else is kind of in slow motion. And I thought, okay, that's a really cool idea. And then I spoke to your brother. Now, your brother's an old friend of mine. We go back a long way. We've had many of these conversations. I said, oh, Jim, I've seen this brilliant film, Limitless. He went, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. He said he based it on nootropics. I went, what? What? These exist?
I
These things exist.
I can tell you the exact drug it was based on.
Right. Well, so that opened up a whole, so very, as soon as I arrived, because I remember speaking to Jim about it on the phone while I was on the motorway. I wasn't driving, right? And as soon as we arrived at the destination, I jumped straight on the computer. I went looking into nootropics, and since then, I've experimented with quite a few, and some of them are really interesting. Some of them are really potent.
Mm,
Um, I've tried things like modafinil and other things like phenibut, but
mm,
what I find interesting is one of the ways which they work is that they are anti-anxiety, or some of them are anti-anxiety. And I don't think that's addressed enough at the moment in society, is that, I'd say a lot of us, if not all of us, have a low level anxiety, and
mm,
largely due to the captivity that we find ourselves in, because it's unnatural to us, isn't it, as
yeah,
the human species? And there is this low-lying anxiety. And I think Matthias Desmet talks about this in his theory of mass formation.
mm,
And what we saw over the last 3 years was clearly mass formation. And he says one of the things is called
yeah,
free-floating anxiety. It's anxiety, general anxiety in the population that we don't really know why it is.
mm,
Um, and I would say that nootropics can have some beneficial effect in lowering this background anxiety, so that our inhibitions that are
mm,
created by Pavlovian conditioning
mm.
and this anxiety are diminished, and we can flourish at a more productive and powerful level. So tell us a little bit about Limitless and your experience in the field of nootropics.
Okay, we're happy to, Lawrence. I'll be honest with you, it's a big subject for me
Yeah.
because it was the first subject I really got into.
Oh, wow.
And how did that happen? Well, Jim and I went off to America in the early 90s. I think it was 1990, but I remember that. And we lived in Florida, and we met a guy called Dr. Ward Dane. And Ward is a thinker like we are, talking about all sorts of things. Go and look him up yourself.
Hmm.
We could spend the next hour talking through his CV.
Just about him.
You wouldn't believe it.
Mm.
WardDeanMD.com is his own website. Okay. Basically, very, very quickly, he was surgeon commander for the Delta Force in the Navy, in the American Navy. Speaks fluent Vietnamese, fluent Korean, because he was out there as well. But he's a doctor, surgeon, doctor. But he got into anti-aging really, really early. And he wrote what are considered to be some of the earliest books called smart drugs, because that's another word for nootropics. That's the public word for nootropics. Smart drugs one, smart drugs two. They're actually old books now. I mean, we're
Mm.
talking late 80s and early 90s, but you can pick them up on Amazon for, about 60 pence. So I would recommend it if you're interested in this to do that. Um, and Ward was, of course, some of his medical peers, shall we say, didn't like it because what he was talking about using some of these substances for healthy people. Well, they haven't got Alzheimer's, they haven't got Parkinson's, they haven't got, why would you be doing that? Why would you, even if the dose is 1/100th of what the Parkinson's patient would do, blah, blah, blah. But of course, the argument is we all live old enough, we all become senile.
Mhm.
But that's one thing we want to guard.
Want to avoid, yeah.
Exactly. I maintain there are three things we want to achieve. I mean, when people say anti-aging, a lot of people jump into saying, well, I want to look like Brad Pitt, or my wife wants to look like Angelina Jolie, or something like that. I say, that's fine. If that's your goal in life, then good luck to you. But actually, if you're very aged, I would suggest there are three things you want. You want to remain lucid, right? Because you want to have a normal conversation. You want to remain agile, right? You'd actually like to, go to the toilet and back, wouldn't you? And get in and out of the bath. Um, and of course, you want independence. You don't want to rely on other people to do the basics for you, right? That's when life, yeah, I think we all know what I'm talking about. So Ward wrote these books. I got into this very early on, and there's a lot of different paths we can go down. But very quickly, the word nootropics has become kind of bastardized since its original. The man who started the word was a guy called Gijera, Dr. Gijera, and he was from Belgium. And he created what is really the first nootropic in the world, and that's called paracetam.
Yeah.
Okay. Paracetam, or piracetam, if want to pronounce it a different way. But what he discovered was
And now we have a ton of different racetams, don't we? Which up at the father of them all is piracetam.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he came up with 6 criteria of what made a nootropic, and I'm not going to remember them all right now because I'm not on enough nootropics.
Yeah.
I said there's 2 things we know about aging as we get older. One, we'll lose our memory, and the other one was but seriously, piracetam. So piracetam was very unique. The first thing you can say about piracetam was there's a horrible thing when they test a drug, and it's called an LD50, lethal dose 50. What does that mean? They give animals such an extreme dose of that drug that 50% of them die, a lethal dose 50. And it's a way of measuring the toxicity of a drug. Okay. The first thing they found about piracetam was the LD50 was so high, it was higher than salt.
So you
So
you can't overdose.
You can't overdose. It's really, you'd have to be unbelievably stupid. What would happen if you took a very high dose of piracetam is you'd get into a state of excitation. You probably wouldn't be able to kind of sit down and concentrate. But what it was, because every drug, particularly any drug, what does the word nootropic mean? Like so many things, they come from the Greek. And it means, a Greek friend of mine said, it means towards the mind, or acting on the mind, whichever kind of way. But he went on to say it was a more holistic sense. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So it affects the brain. We could say that. But one thing a nootropic should have is it should have, low toxicity. Because let's be honest, there's some very powerful brain drugs out there that you want to be extremely careful with. But most of the time, the pharmacologists and the clinicians, they're looking for changes in the neurotransmitters in the brain. So dopamine or acetylcholine or serotonin and all the byproducts. They're looking, has it raised it? Has it lowered it? That's principally the way they judge a lot of these types of drugs. And in depression too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prozac raises serotonin, et cetera, et cetera. But what they found about piracetam was, which made it very interesting, I think, is whilst it had the mildest effect on acetylcholines, was almost insignificant, it was increasing electrical transmission.
Between the neurons.
Exactly. And I think this was what makes it most interesting, between the 2 hemispheres of the brain.
So it was unifying both hemispheres.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, if we think of a brain,
Yeah.
we could see, we know what it looks like. And in the middle is a bundle of nerves that connect the 2, and that bundle of nerves is called the corpus callosum.
That connects the 2 hemispheres of the brain.
Connects the 2 hemispheres. And I'm sure most of us also know that everything we do on the right side of our body is from our left brain.
Yeah.
And everything we do on the left side of our body is from the right brain.
Yeah.
So there is literally a crossover.
Well, I'm left-handed, which implies, and I'm left-footed, which implies that I'm right brain dominant.
Brain.
Yeah.
Right brain. Now, if we go down slightly controversial rabbit hole again, some people say these 2 hemispheres are yin and yang.
Yeah.
Some people say, and it's like everything in life, it's not always true. There's always an exception, to which I say, but this is the exception to that. No, sorry, it's a silly joke. But so some people say most people are right-handed, right? Let's be honest, most people are right-handed. So you're mainly left brain, you're left brain dominant.
Mm-hmm.
They say that those kind of people tend to be more mathematical, more analytical, more, I don't know, that kind of person. Whereas your left-handed person, the right brain person, tends to be more creative, more artistic, right? So you could argue that a right brainer is someone who's kind of methodical, dare I say it, gets the job done. But your left brainer, sorry, the other way around.
The other way around.
That's the wrong way around. Sorry.
Okay.
Not being very methodical here, despite being the left brainer. So left brainers tends to be more methodical, and the right brainer tends to be more artistic, creative. So here's the thing.
But as a right brainer, I need some better access to the left brain.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as the other way around, I want to have more. So what is being suggested and shown in trials, there were two docs in the 70s and 80s.
Mm,
Brasson's been around a long time.
yeah.
One guy called Diamond who did experiments on students, on healthy students, and came to some amazing conclusions. But basically, what the supposition is that by increasing this communication across the corpus callosum, increasing electrical activity and so on, you have ideas and you see them through.
So you can think quicker as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The other thing that I've often heard people say when they take paracetamol, especially people who don't have clarity of thought, and dare I mention this, people who smoke a lot of marijuana,
Hmm.
that this is a common quote: the fog has lifted. That suddenly
Mm.
everything is like in view again. So I've heard a lot of people use, but and as you say, Lawrence, there are many derivatives now.
Yeah. So you got phenylpiracetam, you got aniracetam, fasiracetam, oxiracetam. Yeah. And they all claim to have different effects. One may be social, one may be for focus, one may be for, exercise, maybe. So yeah, so it seems as if there's a lot of development in that area.
I still go back to paracetamol. I mean, over the years, I've been asked many times. I do favor aniracetam, which is
Mm.
popular in Japan.
That's
Uh,
social, that's improve social interaction, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
but I still come back to paracetam for most folks. If somebody said to me, Phil, where would you start? I always say the same thing. I said, start with paracetam. Why? One, it's cheap.
Yeah.
Two, it has been proven to be extraordinarily safe. And three, it will work for most people.
Mm.
It was originally, when it came on the market, UCB Laboratories made it originally under the brand name of Nootropics. And when it came on the market, it was for travel sickness, altitude sickness, and things like that. And they're
Sure.
like both things that happen more or less by accident. I'm sure you know the story of Viagra. Uh,
Well, that was a heart drug, wasn't it? They were testing it for heart, and everyone was getting a hard on.
that's right.
Oh, we better remarket this drug.
They're very good art drugs. So they sent the guys out and said, go and collect the stocks up, go and get the old stock. And they went round and the men wouldn't give it back.
Yeah. So BigPharma does have some successes, doesn't it? It's not all bad.
Oh, Brad.
Yeah.
Preston's great. And where I say to people, if you want to get more synergy, get a bigger bang for the buck, as it were, there's probably not much point in going to mega dosages or even adding more of these original racetams on. And I know people who do.
It's a stack then, isn't it? It's called a stack. Yeah.
But if you take something else that is still a nootropic, still a smart drug, I should say, perhaps, that has a slightly different action. For example, one of my personal favorites is to take paracetam and centrofenoxin. And I'm
Not heard
giving
of
you names here. I'm not giving you brand names.
I've not heard of that one, the second one.
Okay. Centrofenoxin is very interesting in my book because what is it? It's two DMAE molecules conjoined. DMAE is the stuff in fish. This is where when people say you want to improve your memory, eat fish.
Yeah.
Oily fish, I should point out. The ingredient in that oil is DMAE. You can go and buy DMAE at any health food store. You can eat oily fish, of course you can. But a guy called Professor Imre Nagy from Hungary, brilliant guy, he put these two together. Again, I'm now talking back in the 70s again. I'm going back some way here. And he found that it had a number of actions. The most interesting and promising thing that centrofenoxin does is it is still the best agent to remove lipofuscin from the brain, otherwise known as plaques. The stuff that accumulates, particularly in people.
So a bit like calcification of the pineal. This is almost like calcification of the brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It also raises acetylcholine levels. Again, a drug that, not a drug, a neurotransmitter that is principally affected in Alzheimer's disease. So that's a double whammy. But we want to talk about your normal, healthy person who doesn't have a known medical condition. I can tell you that the best feature of centrifenoxin is it speeds up memory recall. Because when you stop and say, well, my memory is not what it was, what do you mean?
Yeah. What does that mean? Yeah.
You know,
Speed of recall, isn't it?
exactly.
Yeah.
Most people, in my opinion, are suffering with a lack of speed. So if you get someone whose conversation is, oh yeah, I was like, where'd you be? Oh, where'd you go on holiday? Oh, I went over to, oh, you know, the place down round the corner on the, what they're doing with all the ums and ers and all the other things,
Just trying to find it.
find the time to
Yeah.
remember. So centrifenoxin, I don't think will improve your memory, but
Yeah.
it will improve the speed of your memory. Okay.
Interesting.
So, and I can break these. One of the things I've had to do in my pharmacy over the years, I had to try and break these down, categorize. Another fascinating nootropic is also a hormone, and it's called vasopressin.
Vasopressin. I haven't heard of that one either.
And
Yeah. I'm usually quite good on my nootropics, and you're throwing out some curveballs at me here.
sorry.
No, go on.
Well, I find it fascinating, Lawrence. Why? Because it's got nothing. They believe the vasopressin lays down electrical impulses in the hippocampus in the brain.
Mhm.
In other words, after a memory is formed, not before. Okay. So what is it? What's it going to do for you? So if you take vasopressin, and it's normally as a nasal spray, by the way,
Mm.
it is used in, it's known also as desmopressin, and it's used in urination and prostrate conditions. I'll get into that if you want to. But in terms of this nootropic side, what will vasopressin do for you? It will not make you remember things better that you've already learned. Okay. But it will make you remember things better of things you are about to learn.
Mm.
Okay. And so I know people who use vasopressin before they go into a meeting.
So how does that work then? Is that it prime the brain so that the imprint of the memory is more, is more embedded or something, so that it's, it's a firmer memory rather than it is just a passing
It's a
glance.
hypothalamic hormone. Technically, it's a hypothalamic hormone. Guess what it is? Peptide. But technically, it's a hormone, right? Because it's just different names, different purposes.
Yeah.
And they think by having more of it. Now, if you go back to Thierry Hertog's work, Thierry will tell you mainstream medicine says you use vasopressin in order to reduce urination because it will conserve water. Okay.
Right.
And if you've got problems with your prostate and you don't want to get out of bed 3 times every night and yet it's ruining your sleep, the doctors will prescribe desmopressin, which is a synthetic version of it, in order for you to stay in bed at night and not have to go to the toilet. Okay. But conversely, the guys who are interested in nootropics are saying, hang on, I remember shit so much better when I take vasopressin. So I go into it. So some people love it to go to a conference. Why? Because
Bang, 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 bang.
they're
bang.
remembering
Yeah.
and they're not going to the toilet. They don't have to be for it. Right?
Yeah.
I also know people who take it before sex
Yeah.
because
Do you remember it? Oh, I'm gonna give you something to remember tonight, baby. Take that first now.
or you get into I know guys and girls who use oxytocin. Now that's not a nootropic, it's another, but that is the bonding hormone.
Yeah, the love potion, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
There's lots of different ways. Men respond very well to dopamine. So
Yeah.
now there's a drug called Decranel or Saligelin. Now that is used for Parkinson's disease.
And that gives you the dopamine boost.
Big time.
Yeah.
And for men, it's a strong libido. For older men,
Yeah.
it's a strong libido agent as well.
Wow.
But of course, I got to confirm.
Because that's what cocaine does, doesn't it? Cocaine is like a big dopamine hit.
Yeah.
And that's why, the beginning, everyone likes taking it, the first bit, and then it gets worse. But yeah, so
I'll get into GHB one day.
Yeah. But slipping it in drinks and that, no thanks. Yeah.
But it's a long story. We probably can't do it now. But if you were a narcoleptic, GHB would have saved that. Sorry, not a narcoleptic, an insomniac.
Yeah.
GHB would have saved your life.
Wow.
You guaranteed sleep.
Mm.
It was through its action on dopamine, but never mind.
Oh, okay. We'll be, definitely going to have another conversation with you. But what was the drug that you said was the inspiration for Limitless? What was the nootropics?
Well, you mentioned it actually. It was modafinil.
Modafinil, yeah.
And actually, if you look closely in the credits, you'll see one of the advisors was a guy called Ward Dean. And And so I remember Ward telling me about the film, and that's a great film. It's a great
Mm.
film, good science fiction film. But modafinil or modafinil, to call it that, when it first came out, it was a French military secret,
Wow.
and it was in the first Kuwait War. They gave it to, or I don't know if it's Kuwait or
No, they gave it to our special forces. I remember reading this because it was before that special forces were given amphetamine.
yeah,
But amphetamine's got too many side effects.
yeah.
So they started giving them modafinil, and it didn't have the side effects, but still gave them the focus that they required from the
It is amazing. There was an earlier forerunner to modafinil
yeah.
produced by the French called adrafinil or adrafinil. That's become very hard to get now.
Mm.
But modafinil or modafinil, I want to say it. I could give you the brand names if you want me to, but it is remarkable.
Yeah.
It was designed for people with cataplexy and
Narcolepsy as well.
yeah, narcolepsy, and it revolutionized those people who suffer with that. It's revolutionized it. But the fact that you can keep an absolutely even concentration for like 8 or even more hours,
Yeah, you can go.
you can still go to sleep.
Mm. I know I've done a fair bit of modafinil in the time. I haven't done any for a while, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You go hyper focused and you don't get the fatigue of concentration, which you
But
can get,
if
and
you
you
want
can
to sit
sleep.
down, absolutely. No, it's amazing stuff. I've used it myself. And the reason is, okay, the reason that it is and it has a paucity of side effects. I'm not going to say it hasn't got any,
Mhm.
but of course, is why? Because it, like paracetam, it hardly interferes with brain chemical levels.
Mm.
What does it? So, what does modafinil do?
Yeah.
It actually increases the receptor sensitivity to a chemical known as noradrenaline. Okay. And so, and the metformin works a bit like that. Metformin improves insulin uptake. Does it increase insulin? No, it doesn't. But it
Mm.
increases the receptor sensitivity to it. And some people think this is the future because you're not forcing the body to make more of this or more of that, but you're in war thing.
Just making the body more efficient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you want to know a theory of aging, and this is the work is a Russia, that's the Russians again, a guy called Vladimir Dilman. I'm afraid he's no longer with us. I wish I'd met Vladimir Dilman. Everybody I've ever met who knew him have said the same thing about him to me. Genius. Everybody said that. Ward worked with him, and together they produced a theory and a book called the Neuroendocrine Theory of Aging. And basically, it predisposes that it's a loss of sensitivity
Mm.
over time.
Yeah. Okay.
So the hormones, it doesn't matter what.
So you get the hormones, the peptides, the nootropics, they all increase or improve the sensitivity
A
of
lot
the body to uptake the resources that we're putting in. Yeah.
What's already there. Just getting more bang for your buck.
More bang for your buck. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, cool. Well, Phil, we've done two and a bit hours and it felt like an hour. I could keep going for another two, but I think we'll draw it to a close there. So just remind us again when this conference is.
Thank you. It's September the 30th to October the 2nd.
Mhm.
And it's the profound-health-summit.com. If folks want to learn more about what I've been speaking about, and this website is massive, but there are interviews, articles, we've been accumulating things since 1996 on it. But that's the anti-aging-systems.com. And if you want to go and read a magazine, which makes it in a sort of lighter, nicer way, that's aging-matters.com.
Yeah, I'll put all the links to those in the description below. Do you have a online presence? Are you on social media or anything?
I'm not that kind of guy, really. I'm not saying I shun the limelight, but I don't do it very often.
Yeah.
So you will find me on Facebook.
Okay.
But I did my first Instagram thing the other day. I'm a bit of a Luddite. I can't keep up. Somebody sent me a message the other day and they said, "Did you get it, Phil?" And I went, "No." And he said, "Oh, I might send it with Messenger." No, I didn't send it with Messenger. I sent it with Telegraph. No, I didn't send it with Telegraph. It might have been sick. It went on for about 5 minutes. And I said, listen, send me a postcard.
You need to take more nootropics. That's what you need to do. Yeah. But Phil, it's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to chatting to you again because I'm sure there's a ton of other topics here that we could have investigated to the same level of rabbit holes, you know. I want to go down more rabbit holes with you next time. Yeah, that's what'll be the topic of the
I
next.
hope the listeners can sit for 2 hours and listen.
Oh, they will. They'll love this. They really will love this. Thanks again, Phil. I appreciate your time. Yeah.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Okay. Thanks a lot, man.